Hello, you're listening to an interview with CRTV's Nate Madden from episode 26 of the Catholic Vote Radio Hour. Like and subscribe to the Catholic Vote Radio Hour on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play, and follow us at Catholic Vote on Facebook and Twitter. I'm your host, Stephen Harriott. Well, the gun debate continues and seems to be going on forever, but there is one gem in the midst of the flurry of nonsense in the gun debate that I really want to point our listeners to, and it is a mini-series on gun facts that even pro-gun people might not know. And the host of this miniseries is, of course, my friend Nate Madden from CRTV's Capitol Hill Brief. First of all, thank you very much, Nate, for coming back on the show.
Oh, I love coming on here. Thanks for having me, Steve.
It's a pleasure. So I just watched some of this miniseries you're doing on guns, a breath of fresh air, and I think it's extremely important. I really want to just make sure that our listeners are aware of it, that they go check it out, and that basically what you're doing is you're myth-busting and dispelling rumors and misunderstandings about guns and about the Second Amendment. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a mini-series that kind of exists inside the Capitol Hill Brief umbrella, and it's on the Capitol Hill Brief page on CRTV, and you go through, and the ones that are Firepower 101, which is the name of the mini-series, are pretty easy to find because they usually have pics of firearms, and they'll also have the Firepower 101 slug on them. Just a few weeks ago, I'm on the way into work and I'm doing my normal scroll through the morning news on the Metro, and I check Twitter, and then I check all the idiotic arguments going on Facebook, and I realize whether people are pro-Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment, there's just a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, gaps in information that could be easily filled with a quick rundown of what the facts actually are. You know, we're all used to the vox-splaining. You know, we're used to mainstream and legacy media outlets trying to give gun facts and really just screwing it up from front to back. And then, of course, you know, you got the gun bloggers out there who have been doing this for a while. But in the conservative and the new media space, there's not many people really going in hammer and tongs on this thing, you know? So the whole goal is to go up against the annoying segments that you see on legacy media, cable news, where you've got the guy telling you how scary the AR-15 is after he shoots, 5 rounds with terrible form and gets the tar scared out of him. And then you've got, does anybody remember the chainsaw bayonet on the USA Today infographic? It's stuff like that. That's what we're pushing back against. And we've done stuff on the actual history of the AR-15. We've done stuff on how semi-automatics and different kinds of actions of guns work. We've done one on ballistics. We've done one on bump stocks. Just trying to cut past all these bad talking points from the media, from anti-gun politicians. The whole point is to push back and do so in a fun and informative way. And it's been a lot of fun pushing this stuff out.
Right. And one thing is that I think a lot of people have great intentions, but they're just scared of guns. And they're people who have never really come into contact with guns. I've only recently become a guy who knows anything about guns. The way I did it is because it was around the time that I got into mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I joined a jiu-jitsu group, and a lot of the people there, by the way, there was a big overlap between people interested in jiu-jitsu and people from military or law enforcement backgrounds. And then the second overlap that I noticed is that a lot of these same people were also really knowledgeable about guns, and they were members at gun ranges, and they were gun owners. And if you go to the ranges and get to know these people, it's amazing. It's like a little cultural subgroup. A lot of them are really solid, regular churchgoers, very kindly, middle American people, and they know a lot about guns. So there's this whole culture, gun culture is what it's called, and that's supposed to be a menacing term, but it's not. Once you get to know these people and you go to the ranges, they're super, super into gun safety, and their whole purpose of owning guns is, there's this philosophical underpinning about, I want to protect my family, or for some people it's hunting. But it's a big part of this debate is, I think, people who are just unfamiliar with, as I mentioned earlier, what is called gun culture. And it's not a bad culture. It's very pleasant and friendly.
It's a common misconception that goes hand in hand with motorcycle culture, right? So, there's the whole thing, 99% of motorcycle owners, higher than that, will never join a criminal gang. They'll never commit a crime. They'll never run drugs. And then you have the one percenters is the term of the guys who actually are outlaws. But for most people, they just like to ride bikes. That's the long and the short of it. And yeah, a lot of people who don't know about guns, gun cultures, other gun owners, they get most of their information from journalists who are clueless about firearms, politicians who want to take away their firearms, and movies.
Right.
So it's the same kind of misinformation and stigma and deception that you see going on in both of these different kinds of cultural realms.
Right. Well, let's say half of our listeners are gun owners themselves, but the other half, they're nice people, but they've never had any contact with guns. And when they look at the gun debate, they're kind of inclined to follow the people who are as freaked out by guns as they are. In other words, urban people who went to J school, right?
Yeah.
Who have never come into contact with guns before.
And they live in buildings in Manhattan where the NYPD is a really quick call away if anything goes wrong.
Right. So what would you have to say to that, let's say, half of our listenership? They're not anti-gun. They're not pro-gun. They're just unfamiliar with guns. And so they're inclined to be scared of guns and therefore to see sense in hysterical, gun-fearful coverage.
It's a tool. First and foremost, you can use a tool for good. You can use it for evil. You cannot use it at all. I grew up on a farm in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains down in South Carolina. We needed guns. We needed them to shoot coyotes. We needed them to deal with varmints that were come after cows and chickens and everything like that.
Right.
I remember walking out on the back porch and seeing my dad in gym shorts, no shirt, holding a 12 gauge because something got into the chicken coop. It's a funny picture, but these are tools. And yeah, like if your only exposure to these tools is how bad men use them for evil and how certain men with badges and uniforms have to use them to stop evil, it becomes a very, very scary concept. But it's about the handler here. If you know what you're doing, if you're safe with it, if you obey the range master, use your eye and ear protection, if you keep it safe, you keep it locked, you make sure that your kids can't get to it, it's a tool.
Right.
You can use it to shoot coyotes. You can use it to protect your family. You can use it to get some delicious venison sausages for the winter.
Right.
And the key to dispelling a lot of that fear, this thing can be scary. The unknown is scary. Is to simply know the ins and outs of how these things work, what the laws are, how it works from the minute you pull the trigger to when the bullet hits a target.
Right.
Information driving out fear, man.
Right. So you kind of started this show because of misinformation. And I remember the first episode, you're almost rolling your eyes like, okay, I had to do this because there was so much nonsense going on. What would you say are the top misconceptions or maybe even lies going around right now about guns? So
much of the misinformation circles around the AR-15 platform for rifles.
Mm-hmm.
People are treating this like it is just the mark of the beast. It's the end of times. It's this just massive destructive thing. It was developed in the late 60s. It has the same capabilities on the civilian market. If you're a civilian, you don't have a Class 3 license, you're not allowed to buy automatic M4A1s or anything like that. You could get the same kind of speed, action, everything else, magazine capacity from something like a Ruger Mini 14 that looks like just a regular hunting rifle. It has a brown wooden stock. It's a semi-automatic action.
Right.
And it fires the exact same size rounds.
And frankly, Nate, honestly, when I think of the AR-15, the reason why I think of it as an assault weapon or a scary-looking thing is literally because I owned a G.I. Joe whose gun looked like that. When I was a kid.
Yeah, because all these aesthetic things, so the aesthetics come from, and I discussed this in the first episode, the aesthetics of it, yeah. The original prototype that they tried to design was intended for the battlefield. That's where the looks of it come from. The action of it, the technology behind it, has been around since the late 19th century.
Right, and actually, and just for perspective,
it's a scary looking gun.
It's a scary looking gun, right? Exactly. But actually, like you said, when it comes to the action of it, it's almost not at all unlike almost every handgun.
Well,
Am
exactly.
I right?
The next big lie is that somehow these rifles, they're more dangerous intrinsically than handguns, than sidearms, because either they look scary because of the history of the design. Oh, and the bullets themselves. That's why we did an entire episode on ballistics. There's been this talking point that because rifle rounds move faster, they're more dangerous in an active shooter situation. And that's why active shooters love to use AR-15s. It's not because just AR-15s are wildly popular among gun owners to begin with, and they're ubiquitous. It has to do with the bullet itself. And we break down in that episode, if you go to the ballistics episode, why that is just absolute horse hockey.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, I think that's the biggest insight that I took from your show immediately was the AR-15 looks spooky. And that's the only differentiating thing about it. What is it? It's a semi-automatic weapon. You may be freaked out by it, but what is a semi-automatic weapon? It's virtually every weapon. Virtually every modern weapon operates exactly like an AR-15. The average revolver is hardly different, but almost every handgun, its action works just like an AR-15. So if you want to ban an AR-15, you're getting rid of almost all household weapons.
Well, exactly. And that's something else we discussed is that there are several different kinds of gun actions out there, from revolvers to bolt actions to lever actions to whatever. You can try to ban this specific type of scary looking thing, and it's going to be as effective as the 1994 assault weapons ban, which was primarily based on getting rid of cosmetic, scary looking things. And the efficacy efficacy of that, you can find study after study showing how, first off, it just didn't make sense, and second off, why it didn't work. It's because, again, there's just so much misunderstanding, and people think that a scary-looking gun equals a more dangerous one, and that's simply not true.
Right.
The recent school shooter that was stopped in Maryland, first off, the kid illegally got a hold and was using a 9mm handgun, but if there hadn't been a good guy to stop him, there could have been just as much carnage as there was in Florida last month. That's simple.
Right. That's true. Well, like I said, it is a great show, super, super informative. If you watch any one of these episodes, you're going to come out of it feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know this stuff. Because it is pretty elementary. Honestly, I think you answer a lot of questions that people think are too dumb to ask. But I felt really informed by it. So just in conclusion, plug it. What's the name? Where can we find it?
So the miniseries is Firepower 101. We've got 4 episodes out right now with plans for more to come in the future. You can find that at CRTV.com on the Capitol Hill Brief page. You just look through the recently added, and you'll see all of our Firepower 101 episodes.
Excellent. Thanks again, Nate, and I look forward to having you on again soon.
I look forward to it as well. Take care, Steve.
Well, thanks for listening to this interview from episode 26 of the Catholic Vote Radio Hour. Again, you can like and subscribe to the Catholic Vote Radio Hour on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play. I'm your host, Stephen Harriet.